After 1, Eleanor Vale heard her husband say he loved her, then forgot to hang up. 6 seconds later, she heard her best friend laughing at her from the same hotel room. She was sitting in her office on the 36th floor of a glass tower in Boston, one hand wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, the other resting on a stack of contracts she could no longer read. Outside, the harbor was gray under winter light. The city looked clean, sharp, and pitiless, as if every window had decided to tell the truth at once. Alexander Vale had called at 8:17 a.m. Not texted. Called. That should have warned her. For months, Alexander had been too busy to call, too buried in investor meetings to come home before midnight, too exhausted to talk about the silence growing between them, too fragile, he said, to revisit the miscarriage that had split their marriage into before and after. But that morning, his voice came through warm and low, the way it used to sound before money, before grief, before he learned how easy it was to turn tenderness on like a lamp when he needed the room softened. "Ellie," he said, "I just wanted to hear your voice." Eleanor closed her eyes. That was her first mistake. The starving part of her still recognized crumbs as food. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am. I just miss you." The words entered her carefully guarded chest and found a place that had not yet healed. Alexander continued, "I know I have been distant. I know I have failed you. Dinner tonight? Just us. No phones. No work. I miss my wife." His wife. After 8 years of marriage, after a nursery painted and repainted into a guest room, after months of sleeping back to back like strangers negotiating space in a bed that once felt too small for their happiness, those 2 words still had power. Eleanor swallowed. "I would like that. I love you." She pressed her fingers to her eyes. "I love you too." He made a soft kissing sound, almost boyish, almost sweet. Then the line went quiet. Eleanor lowered the phone to end the call, but her thumb slipped against the screen. The call remained open. That was when Alexander laughed. Not the laugh he used with clients. Not the laugh he used with her mother, charming and respectful. This laugh was lower. Careless. Mean in the way people become mean when they believe the person being mocked has already left the room. "She bought it again," Alexander said. Eleanor went completely still. A woman laughed beside him. Eleanor knew that laugh before her mind allowed her to name it. She knew the tiny breath before the cruelty, the lazy confidence, the sound of a woman who had been welcomed into her home, her grief, her closet, her childhood stories, and had carried a knife through every door. Nora Bell. Her best friend since college. Her maid of honor. The woman who slept on Eleanor's couch after the miscarriage, and said no woman should wake alone in a house that had expected a baby. "Of course she bought it," Nora said. "She is desperate to feel chosen." You could read a grocery list in that voice, and she would think the marriage was healing. Eleanor stopped breathing. On the other end, sheets rustled. Not office noise. Not airport noise. Not the Chicago client trip Alexander claimed to be on. Sheets. "Do not be too cruel," Alexander said, though he was smiling. She could hear it. "Please," Nora said. She built an entire personality around being the wounded wife. If she ever stopped writing in that tragic little journal, she might notice what is right in front of her. Eleanor's hand tightened around the phone. Her journal. The leather-bound book Nora had given her after the miscarriage with a note that said, "Some pain needs a safe room." Eleanor had written in it at 3 in the morning when Alexander rolled away from her grief. She had written about blood, guilt, anger, shame, and the fear that no one would ever look at her as a woman again, only as a loss walking upright. Nora had known. Nora had held the safe room open and laughed while Alexander walked through it. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Nora asked. "No," Alexander said. "Eleanor only sees what she needs to survive. Right now, she needs to believe I am still trying." That sentence did what the laughter could not. It ended something. Not love. Love had been dying slowly for months, starved by absence and insult. What died in that office was Eleanor's need to be chosen by him. She ended the call. Her thumb shook only once. For a long minute, she sat with the phone in her lap. On her desk was a framed photo from her wedding. Eleanor in ivory satin, Alexander in a black tuxedo, Nora behind them with both hands on their shoulders, smiling like a blessing. Eleanor turned the frame face down. Then she removed her wedding ring, placed it beside the phone, and looked at both objects as if they had just testified. White roses and Thai food from Eleanor's favorite restaurant. He entered the townhouse at 7:20, wearing the navy coat she had bought him for Christmas, his hair damp from a shower he had not taken at home. He smelled faintly of cedar soap and the amber perfume Nora wore, because Eleanor had once complimented it. "Peace offering," he said, lifting the takeout bag. Eleanor looked at him from the kitchen island. There was a red mark near his collarbone, half hidden by his shirt. He leaned in to kiss her forehead. She let him. His lips felt like evidence. "Long day?" he asked. "Very. Same." He loosened his tie and sighed like a man returning from war. Chicago was brutal. Chicago. That was today's lie. Eleanor lifted one eyebrow. "I thought the client was in Detroit." For half a second, his face stopped being handsome. Then the mask returned. "Right. Detroit. Sorry. My head is fried." "Must be." They ate at the kitchen island. He talked about airport delays, difficult partners, numbers that refused to close. Eleanor asked gentle questions. She watched him lie with the smoothness of a man who had practiced on someone forgiving. Halfway through dinner, he mentioned Nora. "She texted earlier," he said, wiping curry sauce from his thumb. "She is worried about you." Eleanor kept her chopsticks still. "Is she?" "Yes. She says you seem fragile lately." "Fragile." There it was. "That is thoughtful," Eleanor said. "She loves you." The words almost made Eleanor laugh. Instead, she looked at her husband and saw him clearly for the first time in years. Not as the brilliant founder she had helped rescue from debt. Not as the boy who used to kiss her hand at red lights. Not as the man she defended to her mother, her board, her own reflection. An actor. Not even a diligent one. For the next 12 days, Eleanor became quiet. Not broken. Quiet. Watching quiet. Alexander flipped his phone face down whenever he sat near her. He started taking calls in the garage. He smiled at messages and erased the smile when she entered. Nora sent memes about anxious wives, followed by little hearts. She invited Eleanor to brunch, Pilates, a restorative sound bath, all the places women went when pretending wellness could replace honesty. Eleanor saved everything. Scamshots. Timestamps. Receipts. Hotel charges hidden under client meals. Gas station transactions in neighborhoods Alexander claimed never to visit. A florist bill for pink peonies, which Eleanor disliked and Nora loved. At night, Eleanor reopened the journal Nora had mocked. She did not write like a wounded wife anymore. She wrote like a witness. On a clean page, she wrote, "Things they do not know I know." Under it, she listed the open call, the perfume, the hotel, the roses, the false city, the peonies, the way Nora had begun wearing Alexander's old Harvard sweatshirt to Eleanor's house and pretending she bought it vintage. She wrote down every small lie that had once looked too petty to her. The dinner party was Eleanor's idea. Alexander thought she was trying to return to normal. That was useful. On Friday evening, the townhouse filled with their usual circle, lawyers, consultants, 2 venture partners, Nora's fiancé Daniel Price, and a few couples who had watched Eleanor and Alexander perform marriage for so long they had stopped wondering what silence sounded like when guests left. Nora arrived in a cream silk blouse and red lipstick, carrying champagne. "For you," she said, pressing the bottle into Eleanor's hands. "You deserve sparkle." Then she hugged Eleanor too tightly. "My girl," Nora whispered. Eleanor hugged her back just as tightly. "My girl," she whispered. Nora stiffened. Only for a second. Eleanor felt it. During dinner, Alexander sat at the head of the table. Eleanor sat at the opposite end. Nora placed herself between Daniel and a banker named Colin, close enough to Alexander that her knee kept disappearing beneath the table. Everyone laughed at a story about a vacation disaster in Lisbon. Alexander reached for the bread basket. Nora reached at the same time. Their fingers touched. Less than 1 second. No one else noticed. Eleanor did. Daniel raised his glass. Eleanor lifted her wine. Some connections are hard to hide. The laughter thinned. Alexander looked at her. Nora looked at him. Eleanor smiled like a woman who still might know nothing. But they understood something small and dangerous. She was not asleep anymore. After the guests left, Alexander followed her into the kitchen. "You were strange tonight." Eleanor about connections. It was a joke. It did not feel like one. She turned off the faucet. "Maybe you were sensitive." His jaw tightened. He hated calm. Anger could be redirected. Tears could be managed. Calm left him with no handle. "I am worried about you," he said. There it was. The soft opening to the trap. "You have said that a lot lately." "Because I am. Since the miscarriage, you have been different." Her fingers went cold around the plate. "I lost a child, Alexander." "So did I." "You stopped saying that after 3 weeks." "That is not fair." "No. What is not fair is using our dead baby as a reason to call me unstable. His eyes flashed. I did not say unstable. You were almost there. He looked away. And there it was. The affair was not the whole plan. They were preparing a story about her. Fragile Eleanor. Paranoid Eleanor. Still grieving Eleanor. The kind of woman whose husband deserved sympathy for leaving. The next morning, Eleanor called her cousin Lydia from the parking garage. Lydia Hart was a criminal defense attorney, 2 years older, sharper than broken glass, and incapable of pretending calm was the same as surrender. I need to tell you something, Eleanor said. How bad? Alexander is sleeping with Nora. Silence. Then Lydia said, soup, wine, and the expression of a woman mentally assembling a jury. Eleanor told her everything. The call, the laughter, the hotel room, the messages, the receipts, the hand under the table. Lydia did not interrupt once. When Eleanor finished, Lydia set down her wine glass. Do not confront them yet. I know. No. I mean legally. If he is already building a narrative that you are emotionally unstable, he is not only cheating. He is positioning himself for divorce, for money, reputation, house. Eleanor's grandmother's house in Beacon Hill, where they now lived. The house with pencil marks on the pantry wall from when Eleanor and her cousins measured their heights. The house where her mother taught her how to make peach cobbler. The house where Eleanor had recovered after the miscarriage because it was the only place that still seemed to know who she had been before loss. Technically, it had been left to Eleanor before the marriage through a family trust. Alexander had spent years calling it our house at parties. He had also spent years pushing her to refinance it. I need a lawyer, Eleanor said. You need too. Divorce and financial. And you need to stop funding whatever fantasy apartment they are playing house in. Eleanor looked up. Apartment? Lydia tilted her head. Men like Alexander do not sneak around in random hotels forever. They get comfortable. Comfortable people leave paper. Lydia was right. The proof came 3 days later. Alexander told Eleanor he had to fly to Seattle for a capital partner meeting. He packed carefully, expensive shirts, the watch she bought him for their anniversary, the cologne he wore when he wanted someone to remember him. Eleanor kissed his cheek at the door. Safe flight. I will call when I land. You always do. He did not hear the edge. He did not go to Seattle. At 11:42 that night, Nora posted a story to her private close friends list, drunk or careless enough to forget Eleanor was on it. A small living room. Exposed brick. Cabernet on a marble coffee table. Rain streaking down a window. In the reflection, for 2 seconds, Alexander stood shirtless with 2 wine glasses. Eleanor recorded the screen before Nora deleted it. The next morning, Alexander texted, just landed. Long day already. Miss you. Eleanor stared at the words. Then she went to his closet. Behind an old shoebox under tax files, she found a folded lease. River North Residences. Leaseholders, Alexander Vale and Nora Bell. Start date, 7 months earlier. 7 months. While Eleanor tried to understand why her husband no longer touched her, he had been choosing throw pillows with her best friend. She photographed every page and returned the lease exactly where she found it. Then she sat on the closet floor and laughed once. It came out ugly. Not because it was funny. After 5, the divorce attorney was named Genevieve Shaw, and she looked like a woman who had frightened better men for less. Silver hair. Black glasses. Silk blouse. No wasted sympathy. She reviewed the lease, receipts, call notes, screenshots, and transaction records in silence. Eleanor sat across from her, hands folded tightly in her lap. Lydia leaned against the window with the restless energy of a woman, hoping someone would commit a crime in front of her. When Genevieve finished, she looked over her glasses. Your husband is not as clever as he thinks. Those were the first comforting words Eleanor had heard in weeks. Over the next 10 days, Eleanor moved quietly. She opened new accounts, changed passwords, copied mortgage records, tax returns, insurance files, retirement accounts, client invoices, described the Beacon Hill house, as if repetition could rewrite ownership. Then she found the second betrayal, the home security system. Alexander had insisted they install cameras after a series of neighborhood break-ins. He forgot the cloud storage account was under Eleanor's email. One night, while searching for footage of him leaving with a suitcase, she found a clip from 3 months earlier. Nora entering the house alone at 2:17 p.m., using the spare key, walking straight into Eleanor's office, opening the bottom drawer of the desk, taking out the journal. For 12 minutes, Nora stood there photographing pages with her phone. Eleanor watched the footage without blinking. Those pages held everything she had never said aloud. Panic attacks, nightmares, guilt, the fear that the miscarriage had made her body a failed house. The fear that Alexander stayed only because leaving a grieving woman would make him look cruel. Nora had not guessed her wounds. She had studied them. Eleanor sent the clip to Genevieve and Lydia. Lydia called immediately. Do not go near her. I know. Promise me. Eleanor looked at the paused image of Nora holding the journal under the desk lamp. I promise. Her voice sounded strange. Too calm. Because now she understood something colder than infidelity. They had been preparing to engagement party became the first public fracture. Nora was engaged to Daniel Price, a pediatric surgeon with kind eyes, and the tragic innocence of a man who believed love made people honest. The party was in a private room above a restaurant in Back Bay. Eleanor had helped plan half of it before her life caught fire because Nora asked her to. You have better taste than my planner, Nora had said. Now Eleanor understood that some people admired your taste while stealing your life. Genevieve advised caution. If Daniel is about to marry into a lie, he deserves truth. But do not create a scene you cannot control. Create a record. So Eleanor went. She wore a black dress, pearl earrings, and no wedding ring. Nora saw the bare hand immediately. Her smile faltered. Ellie, she said, rushing over. You came. Of course. Nora hugged her. I was worried you might skip. I would not miss this. Across the room, Alexander stood near the bar. He was not supposed to be there. Nora had told Eleanor she was not inviting him because it might be awkward with Daniel's hospital friends. But there he stood, whiskey in hand, eyes fixed on Eleanor. She walked toward him. He leaned close. We need to talk privately. No. Eleanor. Alexander. Do not do this here. Do what? His voice lowered. You have been digging through my things. And you have been digging through my life. His eyes went flat. For the first time, the soft husband disappeared completely. You are not thinking clearly, he said. There it was again. The narrative. Eleanor let her eyes fill with tears. Not fake ones. Real ones she had been saving by accident. You may be right, she said softly. His face changed. He thought he had found the door. That is all I am saying, he murmured. You have been through so much. I have. If you make accusations while you are in this state, people could misunderstand. Eleanor looked over his shoulder. Nora was watching them. Daniel was watching Nora. Perfect. Eleanor reached into her clutch and removed a cream envelope. I brought something for Daniel. Alexander's hand shot out and closed around her wrist. Too hard. She did not pull away. She only looked down at his fingers. Let go of me. He released her instantly. But Daniel had seen it. So had 6 other people. Eleanor crossed the room, placed the envelope on the gift table, and wrote Daniel's name across the front. Nora moved toward her like she could stop gravity. Eleanor, she hissed. Eleanor leaned close enough that only Nora could hear. You were right about one thing. I was desperate. Nora's lips trembled. Not for love, Eleanor said. For truth. Then she walked out before the envelope was opened. His voice sounded like someone had removed the floor beneath him. Is it true? Eleanor closed her eyes. Yes. The lease. Yes. The video. Yes. Your journal. She opened her eyes and stared at the rain on the office window. Yes. He was quiet for so long she thought the call had dropped. She said you forged it, Daniel said. She said you were unstable and obsessed with ruining her because Alexander wanted to leave you. Eleanor exhaled. Of course she did. I called the landlord. Her hand tightened around the phone. He confirmed the lease, Daniel said. Both names. 7 months. I am sorry. No, he said. I am sorry. She cried to me about your miscarriage. She made me feel guilty for not understanding how hard it was to be your friend. Eleanor lowered her head. There was a particular cruelty in discovering not only that someone betrayed you, but that they used your pain to recruit sympathy from other people. Daniel continued. I called off the engagement. I am sorry. Stop apologizing for people who lied to us. That sentence stayed with her. That night, Nora appeared at Eleanor's townhouse. Security footage showed her standing on the front steps in a beige coat, face blotchy from crying, engagement ring gone from her finger. Eleanor watched from the upstairs window. Alexander had been erased from the house codes that morning. Nora's spare key had been deactivated. Nora rang once. Then again. Then called. Eleanor did not answer. Nora left a voicemail. Ellie, please. We need to talk. Daniel left. Alexander is not answering. I have no one. Eleanor listened once. Then she saved it. Not after 8. Patricia Vale arrived the next morning. Alexander's mother had never been warm, exactly, but she had been fair. She believed thank you notes should be handwritten, and betrayal should be faced standing up. She and Eleanor had not always understood each other, but they had respected each other's spines. When Eleanor opened the door, Patricia looked first at her bare hand. Then she cried, "Oh, Eleanor." Eleanor let her in. Patricia sat at the kitchen table where Alexander had lied over noodles and roses, and covered her face. "I raised him better than this." Eleanor did not know what to say. Patricia looked up, eyes red. "He told us you had become paranoid. That grief changed you. He said he stayed because he did not want to abandon a broken woman." The words entered Eleanor like ice water. A broken woman. That was the story Alexander had been selling. Not only to himself, to his family, to the world. Patricia reached across the table and took Eleanor's hand. "I believe parts of it," she admitted. "And I am ashamed." That honesty hurt more than denial would have. "There is something else," Patricia said. She opened her purse and removed a folded document. "Alexander asked his father last month about moving money. He said you were reckless with finances. He said he needed to protect assets before you had a breakdown." Eleanor's ears rang. "What assets?" Patricia looked sick. "Your consulting distributions. The Beacon Hill renovation account. He said some accounts were joint by mistake." Eleanor pushed back from the table. Her grandmother's money. Her work. Her house. He was not just trying to leave. He was trying to rob her on the way out and make everyone think she was too unstable to notice. That night, Alexander came to Lydia's condo because he knew Eleanor was staying there. Lydia opened the door with the chain on. "You have 5 seconds. I need to talk to my wife." Eleanor stepped into view behind Lydia. "Your wife heard you laughing at her." He looked terrible. Unshaven. Pale. Eyes red. For 1 second, the old part of Eleanor wanted to comfort him. "Habit is a cruel ghost." "Eleanor," he said, "I made mistakes." "No. You made arrangements." He flinched. "I ended it with Nora." Eleanor smiled. "Did Daniel ending it first help?" His face twisted. "She means nothing. That is worse." He seemed confused. "Your nothing signed a lease, drank wine in your apartment, photographed my journal, and helped you ask your parents whether you could move my money." That last part hit him. His eyes moved too quickly. Proof without paper. "You spoke to my mother," he said. "She spoke to me. You are turning my family against me. You did that when you gave them a lie and called it concern." He stepped closer to the door. Lydia's hand moved to her phone. "Please," Alexander said, voice cracking. "I still love you." Eleanor looked at the man she had planned birthdays for, prayed over, forgiven before he asked. "No," she said. "You love being forgiven." He started crying then. Maybe the tears were real. Maybe losing control felt like regret. She no longer needed a divorce the next morning. Genevieve moved like she had been waiting her entire career for Alexander Vale to underestimate a quiet wife. She traced every payment from the joint account to the River North apartment. She subpoenaed lease records. She documented Nora entering the house and photographing the journal. She pulled messages Alexander thought had been deleted from an old tablet still linked to his account. That was how they found the third twist. Nora had not only photographed the journal. One message showed a page where Eleanor had written, "I worry people only stay because they pity me." Nora's reply, "Use this if she gets difficult. She already thinks unstable." Another message, dated 2 weeks before the engagement party. "After Daniel and I are married, we can slow everything down. She will look crazy if she comes after both couples." Both couples. Eleanor stared at that phrase until the screen blurred. Her best friend had planned to marry one man while keeping Eleanor's husband, and somehow believed Eleanor was the pathetic one. The final message came from Alexander. "Once Eleanor signs the refinance, I can move enough out that she will not fight." The refinance papers. He had been pushing them for months. He said the rates were favorable. He said they should renovate the kitchen. He said it made sense to simplify ownership. He wanted her grandmother's house. Genevieve read the message and smiled for the first time. Not happily, predatorily. That was generous of him, in a way Eleanor did not feel ashamed to admit. Alexander arrived in a charcoal suit with his attorney, trying to look solemn and wounded. Nora did not come, but her name hung over the courtroom like smoke. His attorney opened by implying Eleanor was emotionally volatile, that she had invaded her husband's privacy. That unresolved trauma had made her suspicious of friendships and financial decisions. That Alexander had spent months trying to support a grieving woman who refused to heal. Genevieve let him speak. She let him build the whole ugly little house. Then she burned it down. Lease records, payments, security footage of Nora entering Eleanor's house and photographing her journal. Messages where Nora coached Alexander to use Eleanor's grief against her. The text about the refinance, hotel charges, the open call notes. Then, because Genevieve believed in theater when theater served justice, she played the clip from Nora's engagement party, Alexander gripping Eleanor's wrist and telling her not to do this here. The courtroom went silent. Alexander's attorney stopped looking at Eleanor like a fragile woman and started looking at his own client like a problem. The judge ordered temporary financial restraints, exclusive use of the Beacon Hill house to Eleanor, preservation of all relevant accounts, and immediate disclosure of the River North lease. Alexander's face turned gray. But the sharper moment happened outside the courtroom. Patricia was waiting in the hallway. Alexander walked toward her like a child seeking shelter. "Mom." She stepped back. He stopped. Patricia looked at him with a grief Eleanor understood too well. "You did not just cheat on your wife," she said. "You tried to bury her with her own pain." "Mom, please." "No." Her voice shook, but it did not break. "Your father and I will not help you take $1 from that woman." Alexander looked stunned. That was the thing about men like him. They believed women's love was endless, especially a mother's, especially a wife's. They never imagined love could remain real. After 11, Nora tried to see Eleanor 3 months later. By her wedding venue deposit was gone. Their social circle had quietly collapsed. Alexander had stopped paying half the River North rent because Genevieve had frozen him like an insect under glass. Eleanor had just finished speaking at a women's networking brunch. The official topic was rebuilding after betrayal, though she had used no names. She did not need to. Women knew the shape of certain stories, even when the details changed. Nora waited near the elevators. She looked smaller than Eleanor remembered. No red lipstick. No silk blouse. Only swollen eyes and a beige coat buttoned wrong. "Eleanor," she said. Eleanor kept walking. "Please." The word stopped her. Not because it moved her. Because she wanted to hear how low the lie would bend. "I need closure," Nora said. Eleanor turned. "You need closure." Nora swallowed. "I know I hurt you." "No. You studied me, used me, stole from me, and then called it hurting me because that sounds softer." Tears filled Nora's eyes. "I was lonely." Eleanor stared at her. "Lonely people get dogs. They do not get apartments with their best friend's husband." Nora's mouth trembled. "I loved him." "Then you should have told me." "I was afraid of losing you." This time Eleanor laughed. It startled them both. "You were afraid of losing the woman whose house key you used to photograph her grief." Nora looked down. "I did not think it would go this far." "That is another lie. You planned for it to go farther. You wanted me doubting myself while you married Daniel and kept Alexander on the side." Nora's eyes snapped up. So she knew Eleanor had the texts. "Good. I need you to forgive me," Nora whispered. "I cannot heal if you hate me." The old Eleanor might have softened. The old Eleanor carried other people's pain like a moral duty. But she was no longer the old Eleanor. "Your healing cannot depend on the woman you betrayed. We were sisters." "No," Eleanor said quietly. "Sisters do not memorize your wounds, so they can aim better." Nora covered her mouth. For 1 second, Eleanor saw the girl Nora had been at 19, sitting cross-legged on a dorm room floor, painting her nails with Eleanor's polish, promising no man would ever come between them. Maybe that girl had been real. Maybe she had always been practicing. It no longer mattered. "Will you ever forgive me?" Nora asked. Eleanor looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe one day I will stop bleeding when I remember you. That does not mean you get a place in my life again." Then her 12, the divorce finalized 10 months after the open call. Her consulting distributions. Her retirement. Her grandmother's trust. Alexander kept his suits, his debt, and the River North lease that had become the most expensive mistake of his life. Nora lost Daniel, the wedding venue deposit, most of her friends, and eventually the apartment. Eleanor heard she moved to Arizona for a fresh start, which sounded exactly like Nora. New state. Same mirror. Alexander tried one last time outside the courthouse. Rain fell softly over the stone steps. He stood near the columns holding Eleanor's wedding ring in his palm. She did not know when he had taken it from the bedroom. Maybe the day she left. Maybe he carried it like a prop. "Can I give this back?" he asked. Eleanor looked at the ring. For years, she thought that diamond was proof someone had chosen her. Now it looked like a tiny bright handcuff. No. His face crumpled. It is yours. It was. What am I supposed to do with it? She pulled her coat tighter. Learn that some things do not come back because you finally notice they are gone. He stared at her, rain sliding down his face, mixing with whatever tears he wanted her to see. I did love you, he said. Eleanor believed him. That surprised her. She believed he loved her the way selfish people love beautiful rooms, loyal dogs, childhood songs, and things that make them feel good without asking too much. But he had not honored her. Love without honor was only appetite dressed for dinner. I loved you too, she said. Hope lifted in his eyes. That is why what you did mattered. Healing did not look like a movie montage. It looked like sleeping for hours and calling it progress. It looked like changing the locks, then crying because the house sounded too quiet. It looked like throwing away mugs Alexander liked and keeping the cast iron pan because Eleanor liked it more. It looked like therapy every Tuesday with Dr. Helena Klein, who wore soft sweaters and asked questions that made Eleanor want to lie less. One afternoon, Dr. Klein asked her to read from the journal Nora had photographed. Eleanor chose the first page after the open call. When she finished, Dr. Klein asked, "What do you feel toward the woman who sat there and kept listening?" Eleanor expected to say pity. Instead, she said pride. Dr. Klein nodded. Why? Because she did not break in front of them. That became the beginning of Eleanor's new life. Not joy all at once. Not peace like sunlight pouring through a window. More like thawing. Slow, painful, real. She started taking morning walks along the Charles without checking Alexander's location. She cooked too much pasta and invited Lydia over to help eat it. She bought plants and killed 3 before learning how not to overwater things just because she feared losing them. Patricia visited sometimes. At first it was awkward, but grief builds strange bridges. She never asked Eleanor to forgive her son. She never defended him. She brought lemon bread and stories about the boy Alexander had been before ambition, and cowardice taught him worse lessons. Somehow, those stories helped Eleanor let go of the man. After 14, Daniel sent one email a year later. Eleanor read it in the kitchen while basil grew in a pot by the window. It said, I married someone kind last weekend. I wanted you to know the truth you gave me saved my life before I built it on a lie. I hope yours is beautiful too. Eleanor cried when she read it, not because she loved Daniel. She barely knew him. Because betrayal spreads damage in every direction, and sometimes telling the truth is the only way to stop fire from reaching another house. That same week, Eleanor stood in her grandmother's kitchen painting the cabinets green. Lydia sat on the counter eating grapes and giving unsolicited opinions. You know what today is? Lydia asked. Eleanor checked the date on her phone. The anniversary of the open call. She waited for pain to punch through her. It did not. There was sadness, yes. A scar knew the weather. But it no longer owned the room. I should do something, Eleanor said. Like what? She wiped paint from her wrist and thought about the journal upstairs. The one that had once been evidence, then survival, then memory. I think I am going to finish the book. Lydia smiled. Eleanor had been writing essays quietly for months about women who mistake endurance for loyalty. About marriages that die in whispers before they die in court. About friends who turn intimacy into ammunition. About the difference between silence and surrender. She published the first essay online under her own name. She expected 12 people to read it. Within 3 days, thousands had. Women wrote to her from Texas, Maine, California, Ohio. My husband called me crazy too. My sister knew and never told me. My best friend used my secrets against me. I thought leaving men I failed. Every message hurt. Every message healed something. Pain, Eleanor learned, did not become useful because it happened. It became useful when someone refused to let liars be the only. Came out 2 years after the divorce. On the cover, there was no broken heart, no wedding ring, no crying woman. Just a closed door painted deep blue. The title was The Rooms We Leave. The night before launch, Eleanor found the old wedding photo in a storage box. Eleanor in ivory satin. Alexander in a tuxedo. Nora behind them with a hand on each of their shoulders. For a long time, she stared at it. Then she did something she never thought she would do. She did not rip it. She did not burn it. She placed it inside the back of her journal and wrote beneath it, I was happy here. That matters too. They do not get to steal the truth because they ruined what came after. The next morning, she spoke at a bookstore in Cambridge. Every chair was filled. Some women stood along the walls. Some came with friends. Some came alone, arms crossed tightly as if holding themselves together. During the questions, a woman in the back raised her hand. Her voice shook. How did you know when to stop fighting for him and start fighting for yourself? The room went quiet. Eleanor thought of Alexander's voice saying he loved her. Nora's laugh. The lease. The journal photos. The courtroom. The ring in the rain. Then she answered honestly. When I realized he was not asking me to forgive him. He was asking me to disappear quietly, so he could remain the good man in his own story. The woman covered her mouth. Eleanor softened her voice. I decided my life was not going to be. The success of the book brought attention Eleanor did not expect and did not entirely enjoy. Interviews, podcasts, panels, invitations to speak at women's leadership summits where sponsors printed words like resilience on banners and served terrible coffee in expensive cups. Eleanor learned to say no. That became one of her favorite sentences. No to panels that wanted her to cry on cue. No to reporters who asked whether Alexander had reached out. No to anyone who wanted her to describe Nora as a monster, because monsters made betrayal easier to dismiss. Nora had been human. That was the point. Human people could do monstrous things with your spare key in their pocket. One morning, a producer asked whether Eleanor would ever sit down with Nora for a healing conversation. Eleanor said, "Healing for whom?" The producer blinked. The segment did not happen. Instead, Eleanor began funding legal clinics for women accused of instability during divorce or custody disputes. Genevieve helped design the first program. Lydia trained volunteers on documentation. Dr. Klein advised on trauma-informed language. They called it the Witness Project. It offered practical tools: how to preserve messages, how to document financial coercion, how to protect journals and therapy notes, how to respond when grief is used as a weapon, how to stay quiet without surrendering. Eleanor insisted the program include one sentence in every handbook: you are allowed to be hurt and still be credible. That sentence became more popular than the book. She did not mind. It's 3 years later. Not inside. Outside. He stood across the street from the community center, where Eleanor had just finished speaking to a group of women rebuilding after divorce. He wore a dark coat and no wedding ring. His hair had more gray in it. He looked older, not ruined, not redeemed, simply smaller without Eleanor's life around him. Lydia saw him first. Want me to make him regret shoes? Eleanor almost laughed. No. I can be subtle. You cannot. Eleanor crossed the street alone. Alexander straightened when she approached. Eleanor. Alexander. For a moment, neither spoke. Cars moved between them and the city beyond. Ordinary people passed with grocery bags and earbuds, unaware that Alexander said, I read the book. I assumed you would. I hated parts. That seems healthy. He smiled faintly, then looked down. I deserved more of it than you wrote. That surprised her. Yes, she said. He nodded as if accepting a sentence. I am in therapy, he said. Good. I am not here to ask for anything. She waited. I wanted to tell you that you were right. I loved being forgiven. I loved having you make me feel like a better man than I was willing to become. Eleanor looked at him. The apology was late. It was also clean. Thank you, she said. His eyes reddened. Do you ever miss me? She considered lying to be kind. She chose truth. I miss some versions of us. He closed his eyes briefly. Me too. But I do not miss the woman I became trying to keep them alive. He opened his eyes. Pain crossed his face, but he did not argue. Nora wrote to me, he said. Eleanor's expression did not change. I did not answer, he added. That is your decision. I thought you should know. Why? He looked at her for a long moment. Maybe I am still learning the difference between honesty and asking for credit. That was the first thing he had said that made her believe therapy might be doing something. Good luck with that, she said. He laughed softly, sadly. You sound well. I am. The answer did not hurt him as much as she expected. Maybe that was growth too. When Eleanor returned to Lydia, her cousin studied her face. Closure? No. No. Eleanor looked back once. Alexander was walking away, and the letter the same winter. No return address. No perfume. No dramatic opening. Eleanor almost threw it away unopened, then decided fear did not get to choose for her. She read it at the kitchen table. Eleanor, I am not asking to see you. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am writing because I have spent years trying to make what I did sound smaller, and I cannot anymore. I used your grief because I envied your goodness. I wanted the life you had, then I wanted to prove it had never been as good as it looked. I told myself Alexander loved me more honestly because he showed me his worst parts. But the truth is, we encouraged the worst in each other and called it freedom. I read your book. The page about sisters aiming at wounds made me close it for a week. You were right. I am sorry. Nora Eleanor folded the letter. She felt no dramatic rush of anger. No forgiveness either. Only distance. A wide field between who she was when Nora hurt her and who she was now. She placed the letter in a file labeled Records. Not because she planned to use it. Because some truths deserved to be kept where lies could no longer grow faster than Eleanor expected. Within 2 years, it had clinics in Boston, Chicago, and Denver. Genevieve joked that betrayal had excellent market demand. Lydia said that was not funny. Then she laughed because it was. Women arrived with folders, screenshots, secret recordings, bruised confidence, and the same sentence in different forms. What if no one believes me? Eleanor answered as often as she could. Then we make the record harder to ignore. One client was a surgeon whose husband told colleagues she had postpartum psychosis because she discovered his affair. Another was a teacher whose fiancé drained her savings and told her family she was manic. Another was a woman whose sister read her therapy notes. Each story carried the same insult. You are hurt, so you must be unreliable. The project fought that lie with documents, counsel, and rooms where women could speak without being evaluated for convenience. At the opening of the Denver clinic, Eleanor stood before a small crowd of lawyers, advocates, donors, and women who had survived versions of the same room. The opposite of being believed is not always being called a liar, she said. Sometimes it is being called fragile, emotional, grieving, difficult, too sensitive, not yourself. The audience went quiet. Those words are not always false. A woman can be grieving. She can be emotional. She can be different after loss. But none of that gives anyone the right to steal from her, betray her, or use her pain as an alibi. Genevieve stood in the back with her arms crossed, eyes bright. Eleanor continued, "We are not here to prove women are never wounded. We are here to prove wounds do not erase truth." That line made the room stand. Eleanor did not cry until later, in the hotel bathroom, where Lydia found her and handed 5 years after the divorce. She left Eleanor a handwritten note and her lemon bread recipe. The note said, "You were still my daughter in the ways that mattered. I am sorry my son did not know how to remain worthy of you." Eleanor cried harder over that note than she expected. Grief was strange that way. It did not ask whether relationships had clean names. Alexander attended the funeral with his father. Eleanor went alone and sat in the back. No one asked why she was there. No one asked why she cried. Some families, even broken ones, understood that love did not always follow legal endings. After the service, Alexander's father came to her. "She loved you," he said. "I know. She was proud of what you built." Eleanor looked toward the church doors. "She told me once love could remain real and still refuse to protect someone from consequences." He smiled sadly. "That sounds like her." Alexander stood near the steps, watching but not approaching. Eleanor nodded to him once. He nodded back. No more. Of the open call. Eleanor returned to her office on the 36th floor. The company had changed since then. She no longer worked for the same firm. She owned it. After the divorce, she had bought out 2 partners, restructured the consulting practice, and turned it into a national advisory firm specializing in crisis finance, family business governance, and coercive asset protection. The irony was not lost on her. Men like Alexander had taught her the market need. Her office looked out over the same gray harbor. On her desk sat no wedding photo now. There was a plant she had managed to keep alive for 4 years, a blue ceramic bowl for keys, and a framed note from a witness project client that read, "I was hurt and still credible." At 8:17 a.m., Eleanor's phone buzzed. For a strange second, the body remembered before the mind did. Then she saw the caller. "Lydia." Eleanor answered. "If this is a symbolic wellness check, I object." "It is absolutely a symbolic wellness check," Lydia said. "How is the harbor?" "Gray and judgmental." "Good. Consistent." Eleanor smiled. After the call, she stood by the window and thought of the woman who sat in that office years earlier, listening to a hotel room laugh at her grief. She wished she could touch that woman's shoulder. Not to tell her it would stop hurting. That would be a lie. To tell her the hurt would not be the only thing she carried out. She would carry evidence. She would carry rage. She would carry the last pieces of herself. And somehow, that evening, Eleanor hosted a small dinner at the Beacon Hill house. Lydia came with flowers. Genevieve brought wine. Dr. Klein brought a pie and claimed therapy ethics did not prevent dessert. Daniel and his wife came with their little son, who ran straight into the kitchen and asked whether the green cabinets were magic. Yes, Eleanor said, but only for people who wash their hands. The child considered this acceptable. They ate at the long table where Alexander had lied over noodles, where Patricia had cried, where Eleanor had once spread financial records like a battlefield map. Now the table held candles, pasta, salad, lemon bread, and too many glasses. Near the end of dinner, Lydia raised her wine. To the open call, Eleanor groaned. Absolutely not. To the accidental open call that made my cousin terrifying in the best way. Genevieve lifted her glass. I will drink to evidence. Dr. Klein said, I will drink to nervous system surviving. Daniel smiled. I will drink to the truth arriving before a wedding. They all looked at Eleanor. She sighed, then lifted her glass. To not mistaking silence for surrender. They drank. Later, after everyone left, Eleanor walked through the house turning off lights. The rooms felt warm, lived in hers. In the kitchen, one slice of lemon bread remained on the counter. Outside, rain touched the windows softly. She paused beside the blue bowl near the entrance and set her keys inside. The sound was small, ceramic against metal, but it felt like an ending and a beginning. Eleanor opened the old journal. The pages Nora had photographed were still there. She had considered removing them once, then decided against it. Those pages belonged to her. Shame had touched them, but it did not own them. At the back was the wedding photo. Eleanor looked at it without flinching. She saw the happiness first now. That was new. For years, the betrayal had rushed to the front of every memory, repainting even the good days with suspicion. Now she could see the younger version of herself smiling in ivory satin and allow that joy to have existed. Alexander and Nora had ruined what came after. They did not get to retroactively poison every hour before. Eleanor turned to a blank page and wrote, I was betrayed, but I was not foolish. I was wounded, but I was not weak. I listened, and then I believed myself. She closed the journal. The house was quiet. Not lonely. Not waiting. Quiet. Her quiet. The kind. Next morning, Eleanor walked along the harbor before work. Boston was cold, but not cruel. Bare branches scratched at the pale sky. A couple passed her holding hands, laughing into the wind. Once, that sight would have felt like a knife. Now it felt like weather. Something some people had. Something she might have again, or might not. Either way, she was still here. When she reached the office, a young associate waited outside her door with a folder clutched to her chest. Do you have a minute? The woman asked. Her name was Allison. Brilliant. Quiet. Too careful lately. Eleanor opened the door. Come in. Allison sat and did not speak for several seconds. Then she said, My fiancé says I am too anxious to understand our finances. I found something, and I do not know if I am overreacting. Eleanor felt the old room open somewhere inside her. Not as pain this time. As recognition. She held out her hand for the folder. Let us look at the records. Allison exhaled like someone had finally opened a window. That, Eleanor thought, was what survival became when it matured. Not a speech. Not a revenge fantasy. After 25 years later, people still asked Eleanor about the call. At conferences, in interviews, after readings, someone always wanted to know what it felt like to hear the truth by accident. They expected a dramatic answer. Fire. Ice. Rage. Collapse. Eleanor usually said, it felt clarifying. That was true. Incomplete, but true. The call did not make her strong. She had been strong before it. It did not make her smart. She had been smart before it. It did not make her worthy of respect. She had been worthy before anyone failed to give it. The call gave her proof. Proof mattered because gaslighting turned pain into fog. Proof made the room visible again. Alexander and Nora thought she was too desperate for love to notice their laughter. They misunderstood wounded women. A wounded woman may cry. She may stay too long. She may write her pain in a journal and blame herself for coldness she did not create. She may want the lie to be true because the truth will cost her a life she built with both hands. But sometimes she hears the truth by accident. Sometimes she goes quiet. Sometimes she gathers screenshots, leases, security footage, bank records, and the last pieces of herself. Sometimes she returns a ring without throwing it. Sometimes she leaves the party before the explosion because she no longer needs to stand near the bomb to prove it went off. And sometimes, after losing two people she loved, she discovers the one person she did not lose. Herself. That evening, Eleanor locked the office, walked home, and opened her own door. Inside, the house was warm. Plants lined the windows. Books covered the coffee table. Her grandmother's quilt lay across the couch. On the counter sat the last slice of lemon bread from the night before. Eleanor stood there and let herself feel the whole strange, aching beauty of surviving. The house was hers. The silence was hers. The story was hers. And her heart, after everything they had done to it, was still beating like it had never belonged to them at all. In Boston, during the first snowfall of December, women arrived with wet coats and guarded faces. Volunteers took bags, poured tea, and explained that no one had to tell a full story before receiving help. Eleanor moved from room to room, checking forms, greeting attorneys, making sure every door remained open unless someone asked to close it. In the largest conference room, a woman named Paige sat across from Genevieve with a phone in both hands. Her husband had not cheated with a best friend. There was no apartment, no perfume, no dramatic call. Instead, he had been transferring small amounts of money for years while telling Paige she was too depressed to manage accounts after her father's death. Different facts. Same architecture. Paige looked at Eleanor when she entered. How did you know you were allowed to trust yourself again? Eleanor sat beside her. I did not know at first. Paige's eyes filled. I trusted the records until I could trust myself, Eleanor said. Then one day I realized the records had been teaching me. Paige looked down at her phone. Start there, Eleanor said gently. Show us what you found. The woman unlocked the screen. Outside, snow gathered against the windows. Inside, another story began changing shape. Eleanor thought of Nora's laugh then, not with pain, but with distance. That laugh had once ended a marriage. It had also opened 1,000 doors. She would never call her 27. The company hearing came after the divorce hearing, and in some ways it hurt worse. Alexander had not only tried to move money from Eleanor's personal accounts. He had also represented, in 3 investor memos, that the Beacon Hill House and Eleanor's consulting distributions could support a private bridge facility for Vail Strategic Partners, the firm he had built with her introductions and her late-night models. He called them family assets. That phrase made Eleanor colder than the affair had. Family assets meant the house where her grandmother taught her to make jam. Family assets meant the distributions from contracts Eleanor had negotiated while Alexander accepted applause. Family assets meant a woman being converted into collateral because her husband believed marriage made her resources available and her grief made her weak. Vail Strategic's board convened on a Tuesday morning in a conference room overlooking the harbor. Alexander arrived with his attorney and the face of a man prepared to be misunderstood. He wore navy. He had shaved. He had learned to look less ruined and more solemn. The board members seemed relieved by that until Genevieve and Lydia entered behind Eleanor with 2 binders, a laptop, and the kind of silence that made expensive men shift in their chairs. The chair, Malcolm Avery, opened the meeting. We are here to review concerns regarding personal asset representations and potential misconduct affecting company financing. Alexander leaned forward. Before we begin, I want to state that my marital dispute is being weaponized against the company. Eleanor looked at him. Marital dispute. 2 words trying to cover a lease, a stolen journal, a refinance scheme, and months of planned character assassination. Malcolm turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Vail, the company is not being punished for my marriage, she said. The company is being reviewed because its chief executive represented assets he did not control. Alexander's attorney objected to the phrase. Genevieve smiled as if she had been offered dessert. Lydia presented the documents. The investor memo listing the Beacon Hill property as a family residence available for refinancing support. The draft bridge facility notes referencing Eleanor's consulting distributions as blended marital liquidity. The messages between Alexander and Nora discussing how Eleanor would look unstable if she challenged financial restructuring. The text from Alexander. Once Eleanor signs the refinance, I can move enough out that she will not fight. No one spoke after that line appeared on the screen. Malcolm removed his glasses. Alexander, did you write this? Alexander's face tightened. It was taken out of context. Lydia clicked to the next slide. The context was worse. Nora had replied, tell her it is for the kitchen. She wants the house to feel alive again. Eleanor felt every eye avoid her. That was the cruelty of it. Nora had known exactly what the kitchen meant. After the miscarriage, Eleanor had told her the house felt dead. She wanted to repaint, remodel, plant herbs, make noise in rooms that had become too quiet. Nora had taken that confession and turned it into strategy. Malcolm looked at Alexander again. Did you intend to seek refinancing under that pretext? Alexander's jaw worked. I intended to stabilize the firm. Eleanor's voice cut in. With a house you did not own. He looked at her. With marital cooperation. Cooperation requires consent. You would have consented if you were thinking clearly. The room changed. There it was. The reflex. The argument beneath every act. Eleanor was grieving, therefore consent could be manufactured for her. Genevieve leaned back, almost content. Alexander had said the ugly part himself. The board voted within the hour. Alexander was removed as chief executive pending final investigation. His authority over financing, investor communications, and company accounts was suspended. A forensic review began immediately. Eleanor's consulting distributions and personal property were formally removed from all company representations. Vail's strategic partners would continue under interim management because employees should not lose their jobs because one man mistook his wife's trust for a bank. After the vote, Alexander stood so abruptly his chair hit the wall. You are taking everything, he said. Eleanor looked at him across the table. No, she said. I am taking my... was quieter than Eleanor expected. People imagine social downfall as shouting, slamming doors, dramatic confrontations in restaurants. Nora's happened through unanswered texts. First Daniel left. Then the engagement party guests stopped inviting her to brunch. Then the women who once called Eleanor intense began sending careful messages saying they had no idea. They hoped she was well. They always felt something was off about Nora. Eleanor did not answer most of them. She understood guilt dressed as hindsight and had no desire to host it. Nora's firm placed her on leave after Daniel's attorney sent them evidence that she had accessed private journals and participated in a scheme to characterize Eleanor as unstable. It was not criminal enough to satisfy Lydia, but it was professionally ugly enough to follow her. Then came the podcast. Nora appeared on a small relationship podcast called Second Chances and tried to tell her version. She wore beige, cried within 4 minutes, and said she had fallen in love with the wrong person during a time of emotional confusion. She described Eleanor as distant, wounded, hard to reach. She said she never meant to hurt anyone. She did not mention the journal. That was her mistake. Daniel, who had stayed silent through his own humiliation, released one statement. I ended my engagement after receiving verifiable evidence that Nora Bell and Alexander Vail maintained a secret apartment while Ms. Bell was engaged to me and while Mr. Vail remained married. That evidence included Ms. Bell's unauthorized access to Eleanor Vail's private writings. I hope everyone involved gets help, but I will not allow harm to be rebranded as confusion. The statement was devastating because it was not emotional. People believed restraint more readily than pain. Eleanor hated that, then used it. She gave no interviews. Nora posted one final message. Taking time to heal. Lydia sent Eleanor a screenshot with the caption, From what consequences? Eleanor almost laughed. Then she felt tired. Not sad for Nora. Tired from seeing how hard people work to make accountability sound like injury. That night, Eleanor wrote an essay titled The Person Who Says They Never Meant to Hurt You. She did not publish it for months. When she finally did, the first line was, To reclaim was the nursery. Not because Alexander or Nora had touched it, because Hope had. The room was at the back of the second floor, small and bright, with 2 windows overlooking the garden. Eleanor and Alexander had painted it pale yellow after the first positive test. They bought 1 wooden crib, 1 rocking chair, and 1 ridiculous stuffed rabbit with ears too long for dignity. After the loss, Alexander avoided the room completely. Eleanor entered often, though she told no one. She sat in the rocking chair and tried to imagine the life that had almost arrived. Sometimes she blamed her body. Sometimes she blamed fate. Sometimes she blamed no one, which was lonelier. After the divorce, she kept the door closed for 6 months. Then Dr. Klein gave her an assignment. Open it for 10 minutes, she said. You do not have to change anything. Eleanor hated the assignment. She did it anyway. The room smelled faintly of dust and old paint. The crib was gone, donated during one of Alexander's efficient grief purges. The rocking chair remained. So did the rabbit, sitting in the corner like an absurd witness. Eleanor sat on the floor and cried until her ribs hurt. The next week, she opened the door for 20 minutes. The week after that, she brought tea. Eventually, she moved a small desk into the room. Then a lamp. Then shelves. She did not turn it into an office right away. That felt too aggressive, as if productivity could evict grief. Instead, she made it a reading room. The rabbit stayed. Lydia saw it and said nothing, which was how Eleanor knew her cousin had emotional intelligence when she absolutely had to. Months later, Eleanor wrote most of the rooms we leave in that room. The letter was written beneath the yellow walls. By then, the room no longer felt like failed motherhood. It felt like a place where grief had stopped being evidence against her, and father came to see Eleanor after the company review ended. He arrived with no warning, but with Patricia's lemon bread, which earned him 5 minutes. His name was Thomas Vale. He was quiet, soft-spoken, and had spent most of Alexander's childhood working too much and apologizing too little. He sat in the kitchen and looked older than he had in court. "Patricia wanted to come," he said. "I asked her to let me first." Eleanor poured coffee. "Why?" "Because mothers grieve sons loudly. Fathers sometimes hide behind disappointment." That was unexpectedly honest. Eleanor sat across from him. Thomas looked toward the green cabinets, newly painted then, still imperfect at the edges. "Alexander says the firm is finished." "It is not. He is no longer running it. That may be the only reason it survives." Eleanor said nothing. Thomas rubbed his hands together. When he was young, he hated losing. If a game turned against him, he changed the rules and called it strategy. "I thought ambition would mature him. Instead, it gave him better tables to cheat on." Eleanor looked at him carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to know Patricia, and I will not testify for him if he challenges the financial order." "Patricia already said that." "I am saying it too." He took a folded paper from his coat and placed it on the table. "This is a statement regarding the conversation he had with me about moving funds. I should have called you that day. I did not. I told myself it was marital tension and not my place." Eleanor looked at the statement. "Why now?" Thomas's eyes shone with shame. "Because silence is how cowards participate." The sentence stayed with her. Years later, Eleanor won the second court hearing focused on money. It was less dramatic than the first, but more satisfying in a clean, mathematical way. Genevieve demonstrated that the Beacon Hill house was premarital trust property. The renovation account had been funded by Eleanor's consulting distributions and an inheritance from her grandmother. Alexander's contributions were limited, documented, and reimbursable only within narrow parameters. Alexander's attorney tried to argue sweat equity. Genevieve asked whether choosing light fixtures while another person paid for them constituted equity or taste. The judge did not smile. Lydia did. Then came the River North apartment. 7 months of rent. Furniture. Wine clubs. Flower deliveries. Utility accounts. Streaming services. Even a couple's cooking class purchased under client entertainment. Alexander claimed the apartment had been used for business meetings. Genevieve presented the Instagram reflection. The courtroom viewed Alexander shirtless with 2 wine glasses. "A casual business meeting," Genevieve said. Alexander's attorney did not recover fully. The judge ordered reimbursement of marital funds used for the apartment and related expenses. The refinance attempt became part of the financial misconduct record. Alexander's claim to the house collapsed completely. When it ended, Eleanor stepped outside and called Lydia, who had run to get coffee. "We won the house," Eleanor said. Lydia shouted so loudly a passerby looked concerned. Eleanor stood on the courthouse steps and looked at the city. For months, fear had lived in her body like a tenant. Fear that Alexander would take the house. Fear that he would turn her grief into a legal weapon. Fear that Nora knew so much about her pain that she could make strangers believe any lie. Now for the first time, the fear packed one box and left. Not all of it. Enough. With her own story. Before publication, she treated the story as evidence. Every detail had to justify itself. Every sentence needed proof behind it. She was afraid that if one memory softened, the whole structure would become vulnerable. But readers did not respond only to the proof. They responded to the contradictions. The fact that she missed Alexander sometimes. The fact that Nora had once been good to her. The fact that the miscarriage was not less real because someone used it cruelly. The fact that survival did not make her grateful for the pain. One woman wrote, "Thank you for not making healing sound clean." Eleanor printed that email and taped it above her desk. Clean healing was a myth sold to people who did not want to sit with mess. Real healing was uneven. It included anger at breakfast, laughter at lunch, crying over a grocery aisle, then signing a contract at 4. It included missing someone who harmed you and not letting that feeling become a key. In interviews, Eleanor began saying, "Ambivalence is not weakness. It is often proof that you loved something real before someone damaged it. That sentence made some hosts uncomfortable. It helped more women than the types. Eleanor received an invitation to Daniel's daughter's first birthday. She stared at the email for a long time. Daniel and his wife, Claire, had become occasional friends. Not close, not dramatic, but connected by an old truth and a mutual respect for what honesty had saved. Claire knew the whole story. She had once hugged Eleanor and said, "Thank you for burning the bridge before you walked onto it." At the birthday party, Daniel's living room was full of balloons, toddlers, cake, and adults kneeling in expensive clothes to retrieve toys from under furniture. Eleanor brought books. Daniel's daughter, Lucy, ignored them and preferred the wrapping paper. Eleanor watched Daniel lift his daughter into the air and felt a soft ache. Not jealousy, not grief exactly. A recognition of a life that had moved in a different direction than hers. Claire came to stand beside her. "You okay?" "Yes." "Real yes." Eleanor smiled. "Real yes." Claire nodded toward the children. "If this is too much, you can hide in the kitchen. That is where I keep the adults who hate balloon music." Eleanor laughed. She stayed. That evening, walking home, she realized the ache had not ruined her. It had simply accompanied her for a few blocks, then loosened its grip. Chapter 34 The Witness Project's annual gala was the first gala Eleanor ever enjoyed. She had resisted the idea for years because galas reminded her of rooms where wealthy people laundered discomfort with flowers. Genevieve finally said that if Eleanor hated bad galas so much, she should design a good one. So she did. No auctioning trauma. No surprise speeches from donors. No sad piano music under survivor stories. No one was asked to stand on stage and prove they had suffered beautifully. Instead, the evening focused on practical impact. Legal hours funded, emergency lodging provided, accounts secured, women represented, children protected from coercive custody narratives. At the entrance, a sign read, "Believe her, then help her document." Lydia called it aggressively Eleanor. Eleanor accepted the compliment. During the dinner, Patricia stood to give a toast. She was older now, softer in some ways, still formidable in others. "My son harmed this woman," Patricia said, voice steady. "And she still let me remain in her life because she understood something I did not at first. Accountability is not the enemy of love. It is sometimes the last honest form love can take." The room went silent. Eleanor's eyes filled. Patricia lifted her glass. "To Eleanor, and to every woman who was called unstable because the truth made someone else uncomfortable." The room stood. Eleanor did not cry until later in the bathroom because some habits remained. Lydia found her there with tissues. "Annual tradition?" Lydia asked. "Apparently." "Good." "Hydrating and emotionally inconvenient." Eleanor laughed through tears. Airport. It was years later, in Denver, after a witness project clinic. Eleanor was waiting near a coffee stand when she heard her name. "Not Ellie." "Eleanor." She turned. Nora stood a few feet away with a carry-on bag, hair shorter, face bare, eyes tired. She looked neither glamorous nor destroyed. Just older. Human. That was harder in some ways. "I will not bother you," Nora said quickly. "I only wanted to say the letter was not enough." Eleanor said nothing. Nora continued. "Nothing will be enough. I know that now." The airport moved around them. Announcements. Rolling bags. A child crying near the gate. "I work at a counseling center now," Nora said. "Administrative, not counseling. Do not worry." Despite herself, Eleanor almost smiled. Nora saw it and looked relieved, then ashamed for feeling relieved. "I tell myself the truth every day," Nora said. "Not to punish myself. To keep from becoming the kind of person who needs someone else to be small." Eleanor studied her. There was no request in Nora's face this time. No demand for forgiveness. No attempt to hand over guilt and call it closure. "Good," Eleanor said. Nora nodded, tears in her eyes. "I hope you are happy." "I am." The answer landed. Nora accepted it. "Goodbye, Eleanor." "Goodbye, Nora." They walked toward different gates. That was all, to the open call. Eleanor gave the keynote address at a national conference on coercive control and financial abuse. She no longer introduced herself through betrayal. The program bio called her founder, author, advocate, strategist. Alexander and Nora existed nowhere in the description. That felt right. Still, when she stepped onto the stage, she began with the call. Not because it defined her. Because it opened the door for everyone else in the room. "My husband told me he loved me," she said. "Forgot to hang up, And 6 seconds later I heard my best friend laughing at me from the same hotel room. The room went completely still. Eleanor looked out at hundreds of faces. For years, people asked me why I did not scream. The honest answer is that I froze. The useful answer is that silence gave me time. I listened long enough to understand that the betrayal was not only sexual. It was narrative. They were building a version of me that would make their cruelty look like escape. Pens moved. That is what many abusers, betrayers, and manipulators do. They do not only harm you. They prepare the explanation. She is unstable. She is grieving. She is difficult. She is controlling. She misunderstood. She invaded my privacy. She forced me to hide. The room felt heavier. Eleanor continued. Our work is not to make wounded people appear unwounded. Our work is to make sure wounds are not used to disqualify truth. The applause came slowly, then all at once. After the speech, a young advocate asked, "Do you ever wish you had never heard the call?" Eleanor thought about it. The life she lost. The life she built. The woman she had been. The woman she became. "No," she said. "I wish they had never done what made the call necessary." That night, Eleanor returned to Boston. The Beacon Hill house was warm when she opened the door. The green cabinets had chips now. The basil plant on the window had descendants. The blue bowl by the entrance still held her keys. She set down her suitcase and stood in the quiet. There was no dramatic ending waiting for her. No perfect romance to prove she had healed. No enemy watching from outside the gate. No applause. Just a house. A life. A woman who had learned to believe herself. She made tea, took the old journal from the shelf, and opened to a blank page near the back. For a long time, she did not write. Then she wrote, "I no longer need the people who hurt me to understand the damage in order for the damage to be real. I no longer need the people who betrayed me to become villains in every memory in order for me to leave them behind. I no longer need to be chosen by people who only loved me when I was useful." She paused, then added, "I choose the woman who kept listening." She closed the journal. Outside, the city moved beneath winter rain. Inside, Eleanor turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs, leaving the house in a darkness that felt safe, familiar, and whose loved most was the hidden money. Eleanor understood why. It was satisfying to imagine that a betrayed woman had secretly been powerful all along, that the people laughing at her had been laughing beside a locked vault they did not know she owned. It gave the story a clean reversal. The cheating husband wanted the house, but the house was protected. He wanted the consulting distributions, but the distributions were held through a trust. He wanted to use Vail Strategic Partners as proof of his genius, but the firm's best models, introductions, and early rescue capital had come through Eleanor's private family vehicle, Ashford Lane. The public loved that. Eleanor was more interested in the quieter truth. She had not hidden Ashford Lane to trick Alexander. She had hidden it to protect him. In the early years, Alexander flinched whenever her family money entered the conversation. He wanted to be self-made so badly that he treated help like humiliation. Eleanor loved him, so she made the help invisible. She routed capital through advisors. She let him present her models as collaborative work. She listened while he told investors he had bootstrapped the firm through pure discipline. At the time, she thought she was protecting his dignity. Later, she understood she had been feeding his delusion. That became one of the hardest lessons in her speeches. "Do not make yourself smaller to protect someone's pride," she told women at the clinics. "If the truth of your contribution humiliates them, the problem is not the truth." The first time she said it, she had to pause afterward, because she was not only speaking to them. She was speaking to the younger version of herself who sat beside Alexander in pitch meetings, watching men praise his brilliance for numbers she had corrected at 2 a.m. After the company hearing, Ashford Lane exercised its rights. Not to destroy Vail Strategic Partners, but to remove Alexander from the machinery he had used badly. Employees kept their jobs. Clients stayed. The firm survived under new leadership. Alexander called it theft in one angry email. Eleanor never answered. Years later, one of the firm's junior analysts sent her a note. "I kept my job because you separated the company from him. Thank you for not burning everything just because you could." Eleanor kept that note too. It reminded her that revenge and repair sometimes used the same tools, but not came after Eleanor's third essay. The essay was titled "When They Call You Unstable." It went viral overnight. By morning, anonymous accounts accused her of encouraging women to spy on husbands. A men's finance blogger wrote that Eleanor represented the danger of weaponized female emotion in divorce. Someone claiming to know Alexander posted that he had been trapped by a wealthy wife who could not handle rejection. Lydia wanted to respond with what she called educational violence. Genevieve advised silence. Eleanor chose a third option. She wrote a short public note. Documentation is not spying when someone is trying to rewrite your reality. Legal advice is not revenge. Financial transparency is not abuse. If records make a person look cruel, the cruelty was not created by the records. The note spread faster than the attacks. That afternoon, Alexander's old defender, a former colleague named Marcus Reed, posted a thread implying Eleanor had always been controlling. Within an hour, 3 women who had worked under Marcus responded with their own records of his harassment. Eleanor did not unfold with grim recognition. Men who feared documentation often had reasons. The backlash faded, but it taught Eleanor something important. Public truth did not end the old narrative. It forced it to evolve. People who wanted women quiet would simply change the accusation. If she cried, she was unstable. If she stayed calm, she was cold. If she had proof, she was calculating. If she lacked proof, she was unreliable. The trap was not in choosing the wrong response. The trap was believing there was a response they would bless. She added, "There is no perfect tone for telling an inconvenient truth. Too soft, and they say you are uncertain. Too sharp, and they say you are bitter. Too detailed, and they say you are obsessed. Too brief, and they say there must not be." The final scene of Eleanor's old life happened in a hotel. Not the hotel from the open call. She never learned which room Alexander and Nora had been in that morning, and eventually she stopped wanting to know. This hotel was in New York, where Eleanor was speaking at a conference on family wealth and hidden coercion. After her panel, a man approached her near the coffee station. He was older, well-dressed, with a face she recognized from a memory she disliked. Nora's father. Charles Bell had once toasted Eleanor and Alexander at their wedding. He had called Nora and Eleanor our 2 girls and cried into his champagne. After the scandal, he had sent Eleanor no message. Now he stood in front of her, hat in hand like an apology from another century. "Eleanor," he said. "May I?" She could have refused. She almost did. Then she nodded. They moved to a quiet corner. Charles looked smaller than he had at the wedding. "I should have written years ago." "Yes." He accepted that. "Nora told us a version. We believed enough of it to stay silent. Then the evidence came out, and silence became easier than shame." Eleanor did not rescue him. He continued, "Her mother still cannot speak of it. Not because she blames you. Because she cannot bear what our daughter did with your trust." Eleanor looked at the coffee cooling in her hand. "Why tell me now?" "Because I heard your talk. You said silence is how cowards participate." Thomas Vale's sentence carried forward. "I was a coward," Charles said. "I am sorry." The apology did not change history, but it entered the room cleanly. "Thank you," Eleanor said. His eyes filled. "Are you well?" She thought about the Beacon Hill house, the green cabinets, Lydia's terrible jokes, the clinics, the women with folders, the old journal, the quiet that belonged to her. "Yes," she said. "I am." Charles nodded as if that answer both comforted and punished him. After he left, Eleanor stood alone in the hotel corridor. For years, hotels had held the shape of betrayal in her mind. Rooms rented under false names. Elevators leading to secrets. Bed sheets rustling through an open call. Now this hotel held something else. A late apology. A conference room full of women learning to protect assets. A coffee station where the past approached and found her standing. She returned to the ballroom for her next session without looking back. Of the call anymore. It was the day Eleanor believed herself. She did not know the exact date. Belief had not arrived as a thunderclap. It came in pieces. A screenshot saved. A lock changed. A judge reading the messages. Patricia refusing to help Alexander. Nora asking for forgiveness and being denied access. A woman at a clinic saying, "I found the account," and Eleanor answering, "Show me." So she chose a date herself. Every year, on the first Sunday of spring, she hosted an open house at the Beacon Hill home for Witness Project volunteers. No speeches. No press. Just food, music, practical training, and a long table covered in folders, pastries, coffee, and flowers from the garden. One year, Allison, the young associate who had once brought Eleanor a folder about her fiancé's finances, attended as a volunteer attorney. She arrived with a toddler on her hip and a new last name. "You look happy," Eleanor said. Allison smiled. I look tired. Often related. The toddler reached for Eleanor's necklace. Eleanor gently redirected her toward a spoon, which was accepted as superior treasure. Allison looked around the kitchen. I almost did not come to your office that day. I know. I thought you would think I was foolish. Eleanor shook her head. Foolish people do not ask to see the records. Frightened people do. Allison's eyes shone. You changed my life. You changed it. I read a folder. You opened the door. Eleanor looked toward the blue bowl by the entrance, full of keys from guests who had come and gone freely all afternoon. Maybe that was the work after all. Not saving everyone. Opening doors and teaching women they were allowed to walk through that night. After the volunteers left, Eleanor washed plates alone. She liked doing dishes after good gatherings. The warm water. The ordinary mess. Proof that people had been fed and had not vanished as soon as the difficult topics ended. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Lydia. Alive? Eleanor replied, unfortunately for my enemies. Lydia, that is the spirit. Eleanor laughed, dried her hands, and walked through the house. In the reading room, the old journal sat on a shelf beside published copies of her book in several languages. The room that had once been a nursery had become a place where women sometimes sat during open houses when they needed quiet. The stuffed rabbit still remained in the corner, now wearing a ridiculous scarf Lydia had knitted badly. Eleanor picked it up and straightened the scarf. You have seen things, she told the rabbit. Then she put it back. Downstairs the house settled. Pipes clicked. Rain began softly against the windows. The harbor was not visible from here, but she could feel the weather moving through the city. She thought again of the open call. Alexander saying he loved her. Nora laughing. The sheets rustling. The old Eleanor holding the phone, frozen and listening. For years, Eleanor had wished she had done something more dramatic in that moment. Spoken. Screamed. Recorded more. Said something devastating before ending the call. Now she was glad she had done exactly what she did. She had listened. Then after 43 before bed, Eleanor wrote one final page in the old journal. Not because she needed closure. Closure was another word people overused when they wanted pain to behave. She wrote because the journal had been stolen from once, and every new page reminded her that it still belonged to her. She wrote, They laughed because they thought I needed their love more than I needed the truth. They were wrong. I did need love. I still do. Everyone does, no matter how polished they become. But love that requires me to doubt my own hearing is not love. Love that uses my grief as strategy is not love. Love that calls me unstable when I find the record is not love. I've learned to love quieter things. Keys in a blue bowl. Green cabinets. Women with folders. Lemon bread. Rain. My own voice when it does not ask permission to name what happened. She paused, listening to the house. Then she added, I am still here. Not as the woman they pitted. Not as the woman they mocked. Not even as the woman who won. As the woman who stayed with herself. Eleanor closed the journal and turned off the lamp. The room went dark. Not empty. Resting. For the first time in years, she slept before the rain stopped. And the quiet moment a woman finally believes herself.